In today's episode, I am talking to the amazing Kate Rainford-Foakes all about assertive communication, negotiation, and showing up with confidence in your business or your career. We dive into the challenges women face when it comes to speaking up, setting boundaries, and being taken seriously, especially in client conversations or leadership roles. Kate shares her journey from corporate life at a luxury brand to becoming a coach and how she now helps women lead with purpose, self-awareness, and authenticity. We explore practical tips for negotiating with confidence, the power of language, and how embracing your emotions can actually be a strength. Plus, we chat about my favourite thing, the let them theory, and why letting go of other people's opinions can be the most freeing thing you do. Kate is a careers and leadership coach with experience across both corporate and entrepreneurial worlds, and her full bio is in the show notes, so make sure you go and check it out. But before we dive in, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to tune in to Show Up and Be Heard, the podcast that exists to help women like you simplify your business and your life so that you can stop feeling so overwhelmed. I am your host, Becky McAvoy, owner and founder of Be Heard Socials, and I am an award-winning social media marketer and international speaker who specialises in content strategy and organic growth on social media. Through this podcast, as well as my own social media, email community, and my award-winning membership, the Boss Your Socials Club, my mission is to cut through the noise and overwhelm that so often comes with running a business and being a woman who is juggling multiple priorities and spinning all of the plates. So if you want practical, no BS advice that makes it all feel more simple, doable, and actually effective, or if you're looking for a supportive space where women-owned businesses can feel seen, heard, and inspired to grow on their own terms, you are in exactly the right place. To get more tips like the ones you hear in this podcast, make sure you join my email community through the link in the show notes. Right then, let's get started with this week's episode. Hi Kate, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi Becky, I'm good, thank you. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really excited to have a chat with you today because we are going to be talking all about little bits of different things really, but negotiation, assertiveness, why as women we find it hard, or some of us find it hard, and the bit that I'm most excited about, that I'm always excited about, some like really simple practical tips that I can take away from the conversation, but also anyone listening can take away to put into practice for their own life. But before we get into any of that, and before we get into the conversation stuff, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story in terms of how your business came about, how you became a business owner? Did you always want to be one? Just a little bit about your story and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been a classic rule follower. I was, good at school. I followed the rules. I did what was expected of me. I was a classic good girl. And I sort of fell into this entry-level job after university that it sounds a bit daft really, because it was a great company, but I didn't really plan it in any way, shape or form. I was kind of blinded by the luxury brand name and thought, oh yeah, that seems like a really good idea. And went for it. And I was in that role, or in that company rather, for 15 years. I worked my way up through the company and absolutely loved it. But I really felt quite constrained by the fact that it was a luxury brand. You've got to follow the rules. So at face value, that sounds like it would be a really good fit for me. But it was a place where everything was tightly controlled, quite rightly so, because you're protecting the brand. And there was creativity within that, but there wasn't really, it was all within very strict parameters. And I got to the point where I just felt a bit like a caged lion. And I was following really strict tramlines, even down to the fact that my commute, I felt, was the same every day. There wasn't enough variety. And I'd kind of always wanted to see what I was capable of. And my husband, along the same kind of timeline, my husband was setting up his own business. And whilst, it took kind of everything, like blood, sweat and tears, and I was under absolutely no illusion in terms of what's involved in building a business, I was really envious of the fact he was the master of his own destiny. He got to dictate, what his days looked like. And, if he succeeded or failed, that was down to him. And he was creating something really cool. And it took me a really long time to figure out that actually that was a path that I wanted to go down as well. So I had my first baby and it was COVID time. So I trained as a yoga teacher to try and sort of scratch that itch for meaning and creativity, and what actually I came to realize was a sense of community and contributing to something more meaningful for me. And then COVID hit and I had a baby and that all went to pot. And I went back to my role at Chanel following my first baby and really felt lost. I think so many people can relate to this. You're thinking to yourself, is this really it for the next 20 years? Am I in this corporate world, really, really busy and, on paper, successful, but it's not really scratching my itch. And it sounds really daft and maybe a bit entitled because it was an amazing company and a brilliant brand. But I just lost the love for it. It was such a great place to work, but I knew I wanted something different. I just didn't know what that looked like. I had absolutely no clue. And I'd gone down the coaching route pre-COVID, like years before, but I'd had a really bad experience at a taste of the day and got completely put off. But it was kind of always like a seed in the back of my mind. So when my second was born, I kind of thought to myself, right, it's really now or never. I've got to figure out what this is. I know I have more to give, and I'm really going to annoy at myself if I don't give this a go. So I retrained, and the reason I kind of joined the dots was I looked back at my career in terms of what I'd really enjoyed doing, and I'd led teams of like amazing women, and I loved working with them. I loved seeing them fulfill their potential and really grow in their roles. And I realised that was something that really kind of lit me up. And in my role, one of the roles I did at Chanel was I managed the events in the UK. I was looking after all the retail events for fragrance and beauty. And one of the things we did was we created the first ever Chanel School of Makeup, which was a really cool project to work on. And when I look back at what I really loved about that was it was creating these places for women to come and have meaningful connections and, build their sense of self and find joy. And it was really fun, really, really fun. And people came and made friendships for life. It was fantastic to see what happened. And again, in my yoga classes, women used to come, not just women, but people used to come and really find a sense of calm and connect back to what was really important to themselves and go away with a sense of real clarity. And a lot of them come to say, after that yoga session, I went away and I did this, and they've made this sort of big life change. And I go, oh, okay, hope that was the right thing for you, but good for you. And so I after a sort of a minor detour into the world of sort of interior design, I went full sort of speed into coaching because I realised that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to work with women. I had felt really lost myself after becoming a mum and getting to a place in my career where I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't know what my next version of success in my career was. It certainly wasn't what it was 10 years ago. And I needed some tools to help me do that. And the process of coaching, going through the training to be a fully qualified coach, was a real learning curve for me. And I really wanted to sort of launch into my own business. And now I get to be super creative in ways that I never thought were possible. I get to sort of colour outside the lines, design my own days, design my own path for success. And I feel like I've kind of found my ikigai, and that's really a concept you're familiar with already. I don't know. Have you come across the concept of ikigai before?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
So ikigai is a Japanese concept, and it's about purpose and meaning. And it's something I use quite a bit with clients. And it basically says, if you can find something that you're great at, that you enjoy, that the world needs, and that you can make money from, you're sorted. And those are the pillars that you really need to look for. And I feel like with my business now, I really found that, and I never expected to be in that place. So that's how I kind of came to launch a coaching business. And that being said, it was the most tricky shift from sort of hiding behind a luxury brand for 15 years to stepping into, I've got to put my own opinions front and centre and talk about what's meaningful to me. And that was so scary. So learning how to do that and to become more comfortable with that has been a real journey. And it's something that I work with clients on a daily basis in terms of becoming more visible, becoming more assertive, stepping into what it is they believe in and what they want to say. Whether you're a business owner, defining your own message, or just on a personal level, who are you as an individual and what do you want?
Yeah, do you know what I love so much of that? Because I haven't heard I don't think I've heard that concept before. I think I've heard it in sort of different variations of that, but it's just so well, it's exactly what it's all about, isn't it? Like running your business and building, I guess, like the business and the life you want for you. But also so much of what you said is like, I just relate to that so much in terms of like, I love speaking to people that have all kind of like gone through various different businesses or ideas or things. And I think we can easily think like, oh, you know, I went from a yoga teacher to this, to that, to whatever. But actually it's all like underlying all of that is this love for what you do. Like it's the same passion, isn't it, for helping people and helping people transform, but also your own freedom, like whether that's creatively or like I love that with businesses, the freedom to decide that I don't like doing something anymore and I can do something different, but also the freedom to decide like actually, well, in fact, actually, and this is a really minor thing, but to decide, we rescheduled this, didn't we? This interview to a couple of hours later so that I could do something this morning that had come up last minute that I needed to do. And I think when your business is kind of like rooted in your desire for freedom, but also loving really making a difference, it's just something really special. I know that probably sounds really silly, but and like you were saying, like, oh, this might sound entitled, but it doesn't at all. I just think like that, at least for me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember when I started my business thinking, wow, I've got this sense of freedom, but I didn't know what to do with myself because I really quickly realised I had to impose quite specific structures to my working time. I work part-time around children, and I really swiftly realised if I didn't put some structure around this, I wasn't going to get anywhere because I just wasn't used to it. I was used to going pre-COVID to an office every day, or having a packed meeting, a packed diary full of meetings, or very specific projects and timelines that were imposed upon me. And it was just such a new experience. I realised very swiftly I had to put some rules in place.
Yeah, and I think as well, like you were saying about, I don't think you quite worded it like this, but basically when you run your own business, which is what this podcast is all about, is showing up for yourself and advocating for yourself and promoting yourself and doing all that kind of stuff. And I think there's so much that it's like, oh, this is brilliant. I've got this freedom. I can do what I want. But there's also so many like societal norms that we need to unpick as women, for how we like stuff that probably in a job, in an employed job, we'd have done without thinking. But when it's your own business, like you said, like the structures or the boundaries or just lots of like the ways that you show up and advocate for yourself, like that's quite a journey to go on, I think. And one of the reasons that when you applied for the podcast, actually, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that, because I think negotiation and assertiveness are two really big ones in that. Are they something that have you always been like quite strong or quite good at or confident in negotiation and assertiveness, or is that something you've had to learn, like, I don't know, either in your career or as a business owner? Is that something you've had to do a lot of work on for yourself?
I would say it's a bit of both, because I worked in a commercial role in the luxury goods brand I worked for. And so I was trained in negotiation skills, and you have to work with, I worked with a lot of big name retailers. So I had to be pretty assertive when you're negotiating or just building relationships with very senior leaders at these retailers. So I guess it's something that evolved in my role. But what has really emerged for me since learning so many of these sort of frameworks is the reasons behind why we're perceived differently as women when we are maybe more assertive and also when we negotiate. And it's not just about how we're perceived, it's also about how we perceive ourselves and the fear of being pushy, aggressive, unlikable. These are all real things that I'm sure we can all kind of relate to. And there are definitely tips and tricks we can use and frameworks we can use to manage those things and manage not just how we think about those elements ourselves, but also how we are genuinely perceived. Because there's something about, there was some research done that said when women negotiate on behalf of somebody else, they get a much better outcome than when they negotiate for themselves, even if their tactics are completely identical. And that's because women are seen as, or perceived as, they should be community minded, they shouldn't be pushy. There's all these ingrained gender biases that are, really we're coming up against every day, whether we like it or not, whether it's right or not. That is it's very much ingrained in our society. And there are ways that we can work with that in the short term while these issues are being addressed on a wider basis in order to get what we need right now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like all of the societal norms or whatever that you said, but also like so much of what we do is about, well, not putting ourselves first and not doing things for us, like helping others. And it's crazy, isn't it, that like you saying you can use identical tactics, but the results that you can get for other people are better. Like that isn't surprising, but is also surprising, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like
it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and it's like just out of curiosity, because obviously, like you said, like you worked for this very luxury, like well-known brand, and that was something that you had to do in that role. Did you find that you had to, like, did you find the transition into, because you were used to doing that in your role, that when you started your business, you could do that more easily? Or is it something that, like, because when you've obviously got your own business, like on that level, it's like, well, it's all about you, isn't it? Like you are your business, you are the person running it. Like, did you find that transition hard? Did you have to sort of, I don't know, relearn things or approach things differently? Like, how did you sort of deal with that?
Yes, definitely. It becomes much more personal, doesn't it, when it's your business, and it's much easier to negotiate on behalf of the big brand because it's about the brand. And if the brand says no, the brand says no. It's not within the guidelines that you work towards, then you can't do something. And finding that way through as myself and my own brand. My brand is Kate Rainford-Foakes. I can't really hide anywhere. Was a completely different kettle of fish for me. So yes, there was a lot of unlearning, relearning, lots of things I've learned along the way of my own business that I think, I wish I'd done that differently in my corporate career. I might have a different outcome at that time doing that thing. So yeah, it works both ways, I think.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking as well, are there, this might sound like a stupid question when I ask it, but when we talk about like negotiating and being assertive, I think there's a certain connotations around what negotiating is. Like in that, like when you think of negotiating, you think of people sort of almost standing on two sides and putting forward different cases and whatever. And actually, there's probably lots of really small ways every day in our business that we're negotiating without actually realizing. Is there any ways that most commonly that you see? Well, I mean, anybody really, but specifically women in business needing to negotiate in their business where perhaps they don't know that what they're doing is negotiation, if that makes sense?
All the time. If you think about negotiation, if you reframe it as collaboration, then you're onto something, and it should be win-win. And if you look at it as relationship building and a positive outcome for both parties, rather than one person winning, one person losing, then it becomes a completely different ball game. And I'm sure you can think of lots of examples of where you might use that on a regular basis, whether it's pitching to go on somebody's podcast, for example. It's a bit of a negotiation in a way. You're looking for an outcome for both sides that works. And it doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be overly assertive. We can negotiate in ways that work for us. So it's really about finding ways to change our mindset that it's about being pushy or aggressive. And for me, there's 5 pillars. When I work with clients, I always teach them 5 pillars about what negotiation really means. So number 1 is that it has to be about finding that mutual benefit. So that's about framing it as a shared goal. So find that shared goal for what you want the outcome to be. So it could be something like, I need investment for my business because it's going to give the investor greater dividends. It's about finding that shared goal that's going to make the person go, oh yeah, there's something in it for me as well. And equally on that line, it's about using we language. You need to use collaborative language. Take the I out of it as much as possible. It's not always it's not always doable, but taking the I out of it and framing it as a we really plays to that perception that women are collaborative and really kind of works. It works in that way. The second pillar I always teach is that it should be grounded in data. So when you're negotiating, really think about what concrete facts are you using. So rather than saying, I need this because I'm in this terrible situation, or we need to work on this because there's a really, I think there's a big problem here. What are the facts? So what concrete data or statistics can you use to back up your negotiation? It could be market research, for example. What does the market research say? Can you ground your negotiation in that? And the third pillar, this is my absolute favourite, is the tactic yes and. I don't know if it's something you're familiar with, but essentially, right, we're all used to saying yes but. So if someone comes at you, you're negotiating with somebody and someone says yes but, here's what I have to say. It's a really easy way to flip that on its head. So you're saying essentially the same thing, but the and makes you come across as so much more collaborative. And immediately the other person takes a step back and thinks, oh yeah, we're working to a shared goal. They're on my side. It's not a but, it's an and. That could be something like, yes, I understand there are budget constraints, and I'd love to work with you to find more creative ways so that we can reach our shared goal of X. So you're just removing that combative language right in the middle of the important sentence. So I found that really, really impactful in my negotiations.
Yeah, I really love that because language is so powerful in every respect, isn't it? And I suppose I was thinking as you were talking then, like a key thing in being successful in any kind of negotiation, I guess, is assertiveness, or not necessarily assertiveness, but confidence. But those two kind of things are they're very interlinked, aren't they? And I just loved what you were saying about because that's, I guess, sort of what I was saying before about like the connotations around what negotiation is and what assertiveness is, because I think there are a lot of negative connotations to it, and actually they're quite positive things. And like, I was even thinking, my brain went off in about a million different directions when you was talking, but was thinking about like what you were saying about the mutual benefit. And I don't know how this is going to sound when I say it, but this is a typical woman thing to say. But when I say it, I have a lot of people pitch for the podcast without the only thing that is at least coming across in their application or their pitch or whatever is why they want to be on the podcast and what it's going to do for them. And without any sort of ultimately, like it's the same as when I pitch to go on other people's podcasts. Like one of the things that you really need to think about is what the benefit to that podcast is, because it's not just, I don't know if any of this is making any sense, but like that mutual benefit thing is really important, I think, because like I said, if I get something that is literally like, here's all the reasons it will really help me if I'm on your podcast, but I'm not thinking of sort of the other side. I'm like, well, okay, but what are you actually going to give the audience? What's my audience going to benefit out of listening to you talk and that kind of thing? And I think that can be a really simple thing to forget, or to sort of not do. But also then, like you said, like the power of language, like that simple changing but to an and can have such an impact. And I guess it's kind of the same thing with assertiveness, isn't there? There's just some very small tweaks to language that you could make that have a really, really big impact.
Yeah, I absolutely. I can give you some examples actually, because
that would be great.
One was yesterday. So I think it's really useful to see some examples or to hear some examples that really brings it to life. So, for example, if somebody was to say, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm happy to go along with your idea. It's like a bit passive aggressive, isn't it? We've all kind of been there. We know there's a problem, but we don't want to be the one to say, I'm not happy. I think there's a better way.
Yeah.
That's going to lead to problems down the line. So a much better way of framing that would be to say, I've got some concerns about this idea, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk it through further before we progress.
Yeah.
And you can see it doesn't come across as aggressive, does it?
Yeah. And also that first one, it made me laugh when you said it, because that first one sounded very much like, I'll go along with this, but if it goes wrong, it's your fault. So,
exactly. Nothing to do with me.
Yeah. I'm just disclaiming right here and right now that this is a you problem if it goes wrong. But like being solution focused changes it completely. Because then I guess as well, if you don't get given that opportunity to put your concerns forward or whatever, then you've done the bit that you need to do. Well, it depends what circumstance you're doing that in. But if you don't get the opportunity to express your concerns, then you've at least done it and said, can we have a check? Can we do that?
Yeah.
Have you got any, like, is there, say, for example, I'm thinking this is more about Well, no, this could work when you're working one-on-one with clients as well. But I was thinking this can happen a lot in employed roles. But say, for example, I don't know, you're a graphic designer or whatever, and it's that typical thing, isn't it, of the client wants it done one way, but you have the expertise and you know it should be done another way. If, for example, you use like what you just said of like, I've got some concerns around this, I'd appreciate the chance to chat it through. Any sort of like advice you'd give a follow-up to that if the person that you're talking to isn't particularly open to that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, but if they're a client, there's obviously only so much guidance you can give.
Yeah.
But I would definitely suggest grounding it in past experience. So, if you've got a similar example of where you've gone down that road before and the outcome hasn't been what the client wanted, you could absolutely share with permission that kind of example to show what could go wrong. And it's also showing it's taking it to the nth degree, isn't it? And showing what could be the outcomes should you go down this path. And I think reframing is everything. And again, it comes back to shared goals. What is the goal at the end of the day? What's the client after? What is the end result they want to achieve? And you could position it as two parallel paths. Here's what I think the outcome will be if we go down option A. Here's the outcome if we go down option B. And at the end of the day, there has to be a time when the client has the client has final say. And it's also about using language, I think, to position yourself as an authority. And the way you can do that is by eliminating things like just from your emails and your conversation. I just want to flag. No, I want to flag. This is a major concern. I don't just want to flag. Or over apologising. Sorry for potentially stupid question, but taking that language out of your lexicon completely positions you as more of an authority. I just wondered if maybe we need to involve James in the project to get his opinion. You could say, actually, I'm going to ask James to get involved in the project at this stage because I think we need the benefit of his advice or her advice, whoever it is. Is there anyone else we can ask their perspective? And that way you're being collaborative. You're saying, this is what I'm going to do. And is there anybody else you'd like to include? There's two sides to that points, not just your way of the highway. And I think similarly, if you've got a concern, rather than saying something like, do you think we should maybe revisit option B as part of this project? It might be useful. You could frame that as, I really recommend we revisit option B at this point. I really believe it will give us some useful information or some useful data to take forward. So using language like that, it's certainly much more assertive. It positions you as more of an authority, and your client's going to have more faith in your abilities as a result.
Yeah, I really love that because, like you said, like they're really small tweaks. Is there any other words you hear? And there might not be because I'm not expecting you to come back with more words. But just thinking about it, like the just is such a common word. Or as I suppose one of them is, like almost apologizing before you've even said anything. Like you're going to put somebody out. But is there any other common words or like just or simple things that you see? I guess women especially do that could be a really small tweak to just come across as sort of more confident and assertive.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but it's a common one.
I know I'm not wrong. I know I'm right. And
I could be wrong, but no, I know my opinion's absolutely valid. Thanks, and I've got the experience to prove it. Or I'm not sure, but you could reframe that as based on my understanding, X, Y, Z, or in my experience. Here's what I think we should do. So you don't have to précis it with these little phrases that undermine what you're about to say. And if you feel like what you're about to say could be contentious, you can always frame it so you can prepare the audience for what you're about to say. So you could say, I've listened to X, Y, and Z. I've really understood that this is where you want to get to. So I'm going to tell you where I think we should go next. So you're giving them that kind of runway into your ideas. And that also makes sure that they're listening. So they're ready, they're prepared, they're receptive, and they're listening. So summing up and replaying what you've heard can be really helpful in ensuring that other person feels that they've been understood. So they think, oh yeah, this person gets me. They've really understood what I'm saying, and they've really understood where I'm coming from and where I want to get to. And that's a really helpful technique to kind of get somebody onto your side and buying into what it is you're telling them.
Yeah, isn't it funny the way that we do that? Because I was thinking when you said that, oh, I might be wrong, but kind of example. I had something the other day where I was messaging somebody about something and I wanted 10 of something, the thing they were offering. And I wrote the list of the 10 things that I wanted, but 2 of them had after it like ×2. So in the actual list, there was only 8 things. So they came back to me and was like, oh, you said you want 10, but you've only asked for 8. And I literally looked at it and I was like, well, no, I haven't, because 2 of them say ×2. But I was like, well, I can't say that. Because I was like, oh, I might be wrong. But I think actually it's 10 if you include. And I was like, well, I'm not, like, I am right. Like, and it on their part, they weren't being funny about anything. They just had obviously missed the ×2 thing. I looked at that message for ages going, how can I tell them that, like, no, there is 10 things that I'm asking for. It's just they say ×2. And I went round the houses to be really like polite about I think at the end, I actually said, oh, it might have been confusing the way that I sent it, and sent it as a full list. I was like, why do I do that? Because I could have easily just said, oh no, there are 10 things. It's just I've asked for 2 of this and this. But I was so worried about looking rude or looking, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Isn't it? But you've just phrased it perfectly. So we overthink these things so that it come across as more agreeable and likable. But actually, firstly, it wastes our time, it wastes our mental energy, and we probably don't feel great about ourselves as a result, because we're weakening our own position. We know we're right. You knew you were right. You knew you'd asked 10 things. It's about how we phrase it and having confidence that, hang on a minute, no, I know what I've asked for. This is not a me issue, it's a you issue. Yeah. So I'm going to state the facts. Yeah, perfectly pleasantly, no problem. As you'll see, I've highlighted below, I've asked for 10.
Yeah, and like I said, in that situation, and like I said, in that situation, the person I was talking to was really nice, and they were very unlikely to get funny with me if I was like, no, actually, there's 10. But even in that situation, I still sort of went round the houses to word it nicely. I also had another thing recently where, funny enough, actually, like I wrote the message out to something, and I do this all the time, and I'm sure many women do, but I was like, oh, that looks a bit blunt, actually, maybe I should reword it. But yesterday I was just having a bit of a difficult day yesterday, and so I just there was nothing wrong with the message, and so I was like, oh my God, Becky, stop overthinking it and just send it. But anyway, I got a not overly nice response back. And I think it was because, I don't know why it was. I'm not going to, because again, that's what I do, is I try to think why I might have got it back. But some people don't like it, do they, when it comes across like assertive, I guess, because I was going to say blunt, but it wasn't even that it was a blunt, but it was just like I was just asking the question I needed to ask. Do you have any tips? And I guess this is more about, because actually it quite upset me yesterday. I mean, I am a very emotional person. But I was like, oh God, I shouldn't have done this. And I started to sort of almost not criticize myself for it, but, and I was like, oh, I knew I should have changed that message. And it was actually my husband that said to me, Becky, there was literally nothing wrong in the first message you sent. Like, that person maybe doesn't like it, but that's not about, you've literally just asked a question. Have you got any sort of tips or, I don't know, examples of things? And I guess that's a lot of like mindset work, which is why I'm constantly working on my mindset, but of how to deal with that when we do, I guess, live in a world that isn't entirely, or a society that isn't entirely comfortable with women being assertive or being confident, of how you sort of, I don't even know what I'm asking, but like how you respond to that, or how you take it when people don't, when you've done all the things, like your tips and that, but it's not necessarily received well. If that does any of that make sense? I don't know.
100%. Yeah, completely makes sense. And it can be really painful, can't it? Because you think, oh, that person doesn't like me, or oh, I've really offended them. And we're, by nature, sadly, as women, we are brought up and conditioned to be agreeable, to be likable, to do what we're told. And I could go on for ages about how our upbringing, the schooling system rewards that in women in particular. And so it's a self-perpetuating issue. And I end up unpicking that a lot with my clients. In coaching, it's not therapy, we tend not to look backwards too much, but often that does come up in terms of limiting beliefs. What's stopping you from doing this? Well, actually, it's the fear of what we're going to think about it. Am I going to offend somebody? Is my view going to be, not for everyone's liking? Then you end up watering it down. And it comes up not just in how you are as a person in your business, but also how you receive things on a daily basis. So exactly as you've given that example. And it is, have you heard of the book, The Let Them Theory by Mel
Yes.
Robbins?
It's literally my words of the year this year are let them, because I always choose a word of the year and my words are let them, because I'm obsessed with Mel Robbins anyway, but her let them theory, I absolutely love it. So I've listened to her podcast for a long time on it, and read the book earlier this year, and I mean, like, you're 100% right, it is that, isn't it? It's the let them thing, but explain that a
If they
bit
were
more
having
for
a
people
bad
listening.
day, so it's very, very simple. Essentially, the issue wasn't with you or what you said at all. The issue was with that person. They could have been having a bad day. You don't know what's going on in their life to make them receive what you gave them in a certain way.
Yeah,
And there's actually very little you can do to impact that. So you've got to let that go. And it is essentially, the let them theory is super simple. It is about letting other people do their thing and you do yours. You do
yeah,
yours. You stay focused on what it is you want to do. And if somebody doesn't like it, let them. That is a
yeah,
them problem, not a you
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, and do you know what? Actually, I didn't do that yesterday. But what I really love about and what I got from the book more than what everything I'd listened to before on that, was what she says is like the second part of the let them theory, because you can let them as much as you want to, but the second part is to let me, isn't it? And it's like, let me respond in this way, and let me. And actually, there's probably a little bit of, it's funny again. I got quite emotional about it yesterday, and I said to my husband, "Oh my God, this is ridiculous." Like I said, I think it's like, and I mean, it was the time of the month and all things like that, where you're more emotionally fragile. But again, why do we sort of devalidate how we're feeling because we're like, "Oh, this is why I'm upset." So I guess a little bit of that could even be, let me be upset about it, but then let me,
Let me
carry,
choose.
like,
Yeah, let
let
me
me feel what
choose
I
how I'm
feel
going
to
to
it.
respond. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And you get to choose how you respond to it. So your emotions are coming up, they're telling you something, but then you can choose whether to carry that through or to put that to bed. And
yeah,
we do a lot of work and coaching around naming the emotion. What is it that's coming up for you when you're feeling this thing or this emotion, this feeling? Name it and bring it out into the open, and then you can start to talk about it with yourself and say, is this
yeah,
valid? Like, do I
yeah,
really want to feel this way, or do I want to choose to feel a different way?
yeah,
And we do a lot of work, and I do a lot of work with lots of leaders around choosing the leader they want to be. And it's very intentional. And sometimes that really surprises people because they're like, oh, I get to choose. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You can choose the leader that you want to be, and that can be in your business, it can be in your corporate role. You get to choose how you show up. And that comes a lot of fear for a lot of people, because if you're choosing to be a certain way, that means you're choosing not to be a different way. And if you choose to appeal to everybody, you're going to be vanilla and you'll appeal to nobody. And I'm sure you get this a lot with your social media clients. You've got to have a point of view, and that comes into leadership so much. You've got to have a point of view, and that is going to really get up some people's noses.
yeah.
But so what? Like, let them. Like, just carry on, and you will find the people that resonate with you, and you will be so much more comfortable and authentic in your own skin as a leader. And that is what will come through. You'll be warm, you'll be genuine, you'll lead with conviction, and you'll start to care less about what other people think.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a little bit as well of owning who you are and turning, like with the assertiveness, is we've grown up in a world that, when you were saying about like there's loads to unpick with the way that women, like through school and everything, and you started off in the interview by saying, I was a typical good girl that followed the rules and did all of these things. And I think there's so much in that. But also owning who you are. So I was thinking just then, as you were talking, as I was explaining that situation to you, I said, well, but I am a very emotional person. And I think I've got much better at, I used to see that as sort of like a weakness or a flaw, or you can't be confident and a leader and emotional at the same time. But it's like embracing who you are, isn't it? And owning it as sort of a superpower. So like, yeah, actually, I did get a bit upset yesterday because I am quite a sensitive person. But that doesn't make, make you any weaker. It doesn't make you like, that's actually what makes me very good at a lot of the stuff that I do. And I think there's so much in all of the stuff that we're talking around for being assertive, negotiating, all that kind of stuff, that it's like actually all of that's okay, and the way that you respond is okay. It's just getting comfortable with that, if that makes sense. So it's like,
Yeah,
whereas previously I would have, been really apologetic about getting upset. And it's like, well, no, actually it was quite hurtful. So without going into details of what it was. But yeah, so I like, it's just basically everything you're saying is spiraling my brain in about 100 different directions of different conversations.
Yeah, and there's two sides to that coin. So empathy is an absolute superpower because it puts you in touch with not only yourself, but also others. So you understand so much more, potentially about your end users. So it's a double-edged sword, but if you make it work for you, it can be an absolute rocket-fueled superpower. But it's understanding that you're in charge of that. So rather than letting your emotions overwhelm you, it's about naming them, understanding what's coming up for you and why, and then choosing, is that how I want to feel, or am I going to reframe that? So, for example, I have we're going off on a tangent now. My daughter, she was only 4 at the time, a few months ago, and she was doing her first ever dance show. It's an enormous stage, and I'd been terrified if it was me. And she said, "Mummy, I'm really nervous." And I sat down with her. I was like, "Okay, what is it you're feeling? What are you feeling in your body? Where are you feeling it? How does it feel? Describe it to me." And she talked about this butterfly, this tingly feeling in her tummy. And I was like, "Okay, well, you've told me that's nervous, but what else could it be?" And she needed some help with this, but I was like, could it be excited? Could you be anticipation? I had to explain that one to her, but excitement she really got. And I started to explain to her, could it be excitement because you're doing something new? And that's normal. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that you feel this feeling, but if you tell yourself it's excitement rather than nerves, how does that make you feel? So my daughter Emma took a deep breath and she said, I think I can do this. And she went out onto the stage, she did her dance show, she was amazing, she loved it. And I think it comes up so much, doesn't it? When we do something that scares us, it brings up so many emotions, fear, anxiety, nervousness, all of these emotions come up for us. And it's really up to us to choose how we reframe those and how we want to interpret those emotions that come up in our bodies. And, what are they telling me? Is it just my inner child wanted to keep me safe and stop me from stepping outside my comfort zone into something new? Because that's scary and it's big and it puts us at risk. But, there are ways to kind of work with that. And it is about almost talking to yourself like you would talk to my 4-year-old daughter. It's not about ignoring those feelings. It's about recognizing it, taking it step by step, and saying to yourself, come on, we can do this. I am ready for this. I'm prepared. I am experienced, and I'm able to step into this new phase of growth and do the scary thing, whatever it might be. And I get asked a lot by clients, what is the sort of secret key or ingredient for confidence? And it really is just doing the thing that scares you and doing it over and over and over again. And eventually you realize, I'm doing that thing that scared me last year, and now it's a piece of cake. And I'm on to the next thing that scares me. And we're expanding that kind of comfort zone, making it bigger and bigger, so that things that used to feel like a real panic, a real stretch, now feel far more comfortable. And that only comes through doing the thing that scares you.
Yeah, and I really love that, because I give that as advice quite a lot when when somebody's asking me for advice, I'm like, just do it. But with social media, like going live or doing a reel or whatever it might be, like there is an element where, you can give and you have done throughout this episode, like tools and tips and things like that. But so much of it comes from actually just doing it. And also what I really love about, there was two things I really love about what you just said. Firstly, that I quite often think, so my kids are now 8 and 11, but that conversation you had with your daughter, I had a very similar conversation with my daughter a couple of years ago, and it was at one of her school plays that she was going to be at, and we had a very similar conversation around stuff. And I just think, isn't it incredible that they are growing up from that age with the toolboxes that we're sort of learning or the things that we've learned as adults, and they're going to get that from that age. Like, I just get really excited about the kind of adults they're going to be, because I hope that that sets them up to, to be just part of their subconscious, because that's what they've grown up learning. But also what you said, and I need to do this way more often with myself, like across all things actually. But I think if we approached a lot of things about how would you deal with this if you were parenting your child? So I don't know, if you've made a mistake, or even if that example that I gave, even if I had been, like I hadn't worded my first message very well, or maybe it was my fault or whatever it might be. If that was one of my kids saying that to me, I'd be going, you're just human. It's okay to have worded something slightly wrong. You just go back and say this. And so I think that's quite a good technique, is just to suddenly think, right, if my child or my best friend came to me and said, this thing's happened, like, what would you say back to them? And do the same to yourself, because we just give ourselves so much more, like, we're just not as kind to ourselves, are we, as we would be to our children or our best friends, or just anybody, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I vividly remember, we all hold ourselves to such high standards. And I remember when I was first in a leadership role, completely green, no idea what I was doing as a manager. And I thought I had to be this kind of ice queen and, do everything perfectly and, not get anything wrong. I was so afraid to show weakness or make a mistake that I did come across as an ice queen. I was given that feedback by my boss at the time, who was amazing. And it was the best feedback I could have been given, because I realized, like, I'm not enjoying this. My team aren't relating to me. I was getting it all wrong, making all the mistakes. And if I just relax a bit into it and show that I'm human and, give myself the ability or permission to get it wrong and to ask for help, then everyone enjoys it more. The team reacted completely differently to me. I relaxed into the role and had a much better time and a much better experience. And it was win-win all round. And that was such a massive lesson for me in leadership, is just don't put so much pressure on yourself. Because it didn't come from my boss, it was from me. I had to get it right. And I was setting myself up for failure, and it did not come across well.
Yeah, and you're human first, aren't you? Can you imagine saying to your child, if they came to you and said, I did this thing and I shouldn't have worded it like this, turning around to them and going, oh my God, you're an awful person. Like, I can't believe you did this and this. And I think that's, where you were saying just now about the sort of just doing it and know that you will get it wrong sometimes. And that's okay. Like, as long as you're not doing anything with malice or like hateful intent, nothing's going to go that wrong, and you are human and you can have off days and all that kind of stuff. I think that's just a thing we probably I definitely need to remember more. But yeah, I am really conscious. I could honestly, and I say this a lot on podcast interviews, and it's not just a thing I say, it is because I get on and I just am so genuine. Like I said to you earlier, like, my brain goes off in 100 directions. I was like, I could ask this question and this question. But I am very conscious of the time, both your time and the people's listening's time. So is there anything else before? I've got a couple of questions that I always ask at the end of the interviews, which I'll ask you in a moment. But is there anything else you want to share at all? Either reiterate something that you said that you'd really like people to remember, or any other tips that you haven't had a chance to share, or anything at all that you'd like to share before we finish?
Yeah, there is actually. It's related to negotiation and assertiveness. And I think I've got a few top tips, really, aside from what I've already shared. So one of them would be prepare. So if you're going into a situation where you need to come across in a certain way, or you're walking into negotiation, prepare. Do your homework. Think about all the things that the person could come back with. What could their concerns be? What could their challenges be? And make sure you have a response to those. So write it down if you need to, and then rehearse it. Actually say the things out loud to make sure that you're coming across in a certain way. Your body language is super important. So whether you're on a Zoom call or in person, think about really taking a deep breath and owning that space, and take up the space. Don't be afraid to take up room. Don't make yourself small. Stand up tall or sit up tall, and make sure that you are owning that space. Also, something else I'd love to share is that if you're negotiating, and if it's a number that you're negotiating on, think about the maximum that you think that person will agree to, and then add 10%. And make that your starting point. Make sure that you make the first offer, because you'll get a better outcome that way. And then finally, if the person comes back and says no, ask, what will it take to get a yes within a certain time period? So make sure that you have a clear framework on what will make that person say yes. Is there something you can do? Is there a plan you can work to make it a yes? So don't just accept the no and walk away. There are other things you can do to make it more likely you're going to get a yes next time. Those are kind of my end top tips for getting that negotiation to work in your favour.
I love that. And I especially love the don't just sort of take the no and walk away, because I think as well, like I've had it in the past where a bit like you said, what can take it to get to the yes, but also it's, say for example, you are negotiating a budget or whatever it might be. It's like, okay, you give me your number and I'll tell you what I can do for that. So you're not just lowering your like you're not doing the same amount of work for a lower budget, but you're still, if that's the right thing for you, taking on the work but doing less for it. So I love the don't just take a no, not to be like hammer them until they say yes, but I think it's so easy to just go, all right, okay, don't worry then, sorry for, you know.
Absolutely.
So I really love that, and I feel like that's a brilliant place to sort of end that conversation, because it's on some real practical tips. So thank you so much, because like I said, I found it really useful, so I am certain anybody listening will also find it really useful. But I do just want to ask before you go, obviously the podcast is Show Up and Be Heard, and you know, we've spoken quite a lot about this like across the like the time that we've been talking about showing up and the confidence and assertiveness you need to do it and all that kind of stuff. Are there any things that help you show up in your business, and what tips would you give someone else to do the same? So, you know, like things like getting yourself on podcasts, or whether it's showing up on your socials or whatever it might be. What things help you do that? And do you have any tips for people to do the same?
Yeah. So for me, I'm really active on LinkedIn, and I make it my mission to post 5 times a week. And at first, that was completely unrealistic for me. And I had to, you know, every post would take like an hour at least to draft and then find an image that goes with it. And as with all these things, it gets easier over time, you get quicker, you develop a bank of content, you know what things you want to say. So I note down on my phone any ideas for content that come to mind. I have like a running bank of stuff that I just choose from if I'm stuck for ideas. The other thing is not to overthink it. So as I said before, I found it a real challenge to launch my business and really speak up myself and own what it is I want to say. And just not overthinking it is the best thing ever. It makes it so much easier to just do the thing, because I'm constantly thinking, oh, I might offend that person, or how will that person take it? Like, it doesn't matter. They probably won't even see it. If they do, they don't like it, they're probably not your people. You know, what's going to happen? What's the worst that can happen?
I do love asking myself that question, the what's the worst that can happen. And I worked with a coach before who got me to tell them the worst things that could happen to me right now. And I gave the 2 worst things. And I realised I've mentioned this on the podcast before, they're very personal to me, because I know some people would really want this, but mine are either that I get pregnant again or I die. Those are the 2 worst things that could happen to me personally right now. And it's like, right, okay, if neither of those things are going to happen, it's not going to be that catastrophic. And there's very few things I do in my life or business that's going to result in one of those 2 things. So I love that.
And perspective is everything, isn't it?
Exactly. And actually, when and this is as a social media marketer, it was going live that I wanted to do. It was when I first started my business, I was petrified of going live, and that's what we were sort of working towards. And they got me to write down like all the things that could go wrong. And I put, you know, like the tech would fail, or, you know, this would happen, or that would happen, or blah, blah, blah. And almost every single one of those things happened on my first live. The tech did fail. Like I kept getting cut off going live. But by the end of it, I was laughing, because I was just like, oh, do you know what? Because then it was like, what's the worst that can happen? Oh, the tech could fail. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I will just go live again. And actually, for pure honesty, which is what I'm all about, midway through this podcast recording, we got cut off and the internet got cut out. So we had to do that, didn't we? And it's like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, the internet's cut out. Oh, okay, so we'll just pick it back up and start again. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, just crack on. And I do that actually with a lot of leaders I coach. And some of them are really terrified of standing up in front of people and being asked a question they can't answer. And you're like, well, let's give you some tools so you have things to say that make you sound confident and like you're going to come back to them at a later date. But what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you're going to freeze. Well, that's not going to happen, because now you've got something to say.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's about having that preparation.
Yeah.
And realising the worst that can happen actually isn't that bad, and you will be able to recover from it.
Yeah, I really love that. That is, like I said, that's one of my favourite questions to ask myself. And I just think it's such a simple but powerful approach to showing up, isn't it? To doing the thing. Also, I don't know if you there's a lot of stuff you've said in here, to be fair, that would kind of answer this question. So feel free to say something you've already said or whether there is anything. But what advice would you go back and give yourself? In fact, how long have you been running your business? But what advice would you go back and give yourself in the year? How long, sorry?
For a year and a half, probably. It's still very new.
Yeah, but also the amount you've learned in that time will be astronomical, won't it? So is there any advice that you'd go back and give yourself in the early days of running your business? Or
Yes. I would absolutely curb my shiny object syndrome, because I 100% have lots of ideas and then never enough time to actually execute them. So I end up starting 50 million different things and then not getting to the completion. And the only thing that really matters is completing something and getting it out there. And I've got to work on my perfectionism there. And that's something I do every day. But realizing that you can schedule stuff and put it into next year was quite revolutionary for me, because it meant that I'm not forgetting about my ideas, but I'm sequencing them in a way that makes sense for me and my business.
yes.
I also have, in that same vein, I've got a real hurry up driver. I want everything to happen yesterday, and I want to go 100 miles an hour when realistically my children are just turned 5 and 2. That's not possible for me at my phase of life. So I really have to work on that and really kind of trust the process and realise that what might feel like small steps are still building blocks. And starting now will put me in a much better position in 2 years' time when my youngest goes to school than not doing anything at all. So my week, when I look at my week and I get to the end of the week, I think, I haven't achieved what I wanted to achieve. I tend to try and write down what I have achieved, so I can really see that I'm still putting the things in place. I'm working with my lovely clients, I'm putting the marketing steps in place that I need to put in place, and whilst it might feel small to where I want to kind of ultimately get to, those building blocks are going to, really pay dividends in the long run. That's definitely some advice I give myself. I could go back again.
That's amazing, and I really relate to so much of that, of the I want everything and I want it yesterday, and I have all the ideas. There was a really good episode a few weeks ago which I'll link to in the show notes. It was with the wonderful Lizzie, and we spoke a bit about time management, but also how it was worded better than this, I think, but how to create the business and life you want in the time you have. And she spoke a lot about practical strategies and various different things because it's hard, isn't it, when you've got tons of ideas and you want to do them all and you're excited about them all. So I'll link to that in the show notes if anybody is interested in listening. But just a final thing to ask you. I know you mentioned you're most active on LinkedIn, but where can people find you? We'll link to it all in the show notes.
Yeah, so absolutely on LinkedIn. I show up there pretty much daily. You can find me on my website at katerainford.com. And I have a mailing list where I email every week, sharing leadership tips, career advice, reflections on motherhood and career, and all sorts of musings that I hope are helpful.
Amazing. And can they sign up to that through your website? If they go to your website, will they find?
Yes, and I will share the link with you as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, because like I said, I've taken a lot from the conversation, so I'm absolutely certain people listening will have. And obviously, as always, if you have, go follow and connect with Kate, but also drop either of us messages or share it, because I love to hear your takeaways and what you've enjoyed about it. But thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Becky. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I am truly grateful for your time and your energy today. I know that you've got a million things on your plate, and the fact that you're here investing your time into something that will help your business and your socials grow is something I am really proud of you for. Before you go though, if you love this podcast and you're a woman running a small business who wants to make social media easier and business life less lonely, I've got something for you that I want to tell you a little bit more about. The Boss Your Socials Club is here to bring you inspiration, accountability, confidence, and community. It's a place where we ban the word should, because we believe in bespoke advice that will work for you, your circumstances, your life, and your business. As a member, you get a clear content plan every month, ready to use templates, and the accountability to actually show up. Plus, you'll have expert support and a community of incredible women who get it and who want to cheer you on and support you in your business journey. And we all need a bit of that. Think of it like having a teeny tiny social media marketing expert in your pocket, giving you the knowledge and the assurance when it comes to posting great, engaging content on your social media platforms and showing up in a way that grows your business without the overwhelm and with a community of women cheering you on. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your social media to the next level, Boss Your Socials Club has everything you need. You can join from just £24 a month or save with an annual membership, which is £240 for the year, so you get 2 months free. Thank you again for being here today, and I can't wait to catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep showing up, and please always remember, realising that you're not actually meant to do this stuff alone is the first step to making it easier. So I'll see you next time.